Hello class, welcome back. So now that we finished the login and the register, both on the client side and the server side, we can now start to work with messages. So now let's start to create the messenger model and the messages table and allow the users to send each other messages. So let's get to that. All right, so here in VS Code, I'm going to open the terminal. So in the root directory, in the server directory, let's create the message model. So let's say SQLize model generate, and we'll give it a name, so dash dash name, and this will be message, and we'll give it some attributes, so dash dash attributes, and this will have a content attribute which holds the message itself. So this will be content colon string, so it's a string, and we'll have a UUID, and this will be, I think UUID is an available type, so you can say colon UUID. And to store the message, we need to store who sent the message and to who they sent this message. So I'm going to use these two fields called from and to. So let's say from colon, and that will be a string. We can do this in multiple ways, but I think this way is better, where we store the username of the from user and the username of the to user, because the usernames are unique, so we can use them. So from string and to colon string as well. And hit enter, and I'm gonna run the server. So actually we need to migrate first, so I'll skip that. Let's go to our model, the message model. I'm gonna actually rename this to capital M message, and this one as well to capital U user. So in the message model, we need to change these and make them not nullable. So let's cut that. And inside of here, and we'll say, so the type, and paste type, type, and spell that, paste that back in. And here we'll have allow null of false, and put a comma there. And I'm just going to copy this for the from and for the to as well. And for the UID, I'm going to cut this, actually cut it, open an object, and this will have that type, paste it back in. And it will have a default value, so default value, and this will be data types dot UUID v4, and also it's not nullable, so we'll say allow null false. Okay, save that. And here the model name is fine, but the table name should be messages with a lowercase m. So I'm just gonna copy these 4 fields, and let's go to the migration that was created. And here, starting from content down to 2, let's paste what we copied, and of course replace the data types with SQLize, like so. And here select that, and then hold Alt and select this as well, and change this to messages with a lowercase m, and save. Actually save all files, and let's run that migration. So here I'll say in the terminal, I'll say SQLize db :migrate. And there we go. So we get our table that's created. If you go and check your database, that table is now created. So let's run our server. Now we need to create a resolver, and this will be a mutation to allow users to send messages to each other. So let's go to our resolvers. So GraphQL resolvers. And here, actually before that, we need to go to our type definitions and declare that. So inside the mutation type under register here, let's create this, and let's call it send message or create message. Create message. Actually, I'll change it to send message. Send message, and to send the message, we need 2 things. We need the user to tell us who they're sending it to, and we need to know the content of the message. So the first thing will be to, and this will be a string, and it's of course required. And the second will be the content of the message, and of course that's required as well. We can have an empty message. So let's say colon, and this returns a message, which we haven't created yet. So let's create this type. So here underneath user, let's say type message, and this will have the same fields that we had in the model itself. So a UID, which is a string, and that's required. Content, which is a string as well, and that's required. A from, a required string, and the to, same thing here as well. So Let's save. And now let's go and create this send message resolver. So down here, okay, where are we? So this is the register. Right underneath the register, let's say send message, and this will be an async resolver, and it will take the parent, the args, and we'll need the context because we need to determine who this whether this user is logged in or not. So of course, let's do try catch error, and if we get an error, I'm gonna throw it, and I've got console log it, so console log that error. Now, first thing we need to do here, before we do any logic for persisting messages in our database, we need to make sure that the user is authenticated. So we could copy this, where are we? This block of code here, but let's actually refactor this into its own functionality, because if we need it in multiple places, I'm not going to be copying it and pasting it. So I'm going to cut all of this, or actually just cut this if statement from here. And let's go to our server, our entry server.js. Now we need to include that in our context. So this will serve as middleware. So on every request, we're going to fetch that token and then populate the user in the context body and forward it to the resolver. And then there determine what to do with that data. So here for context, actually I'm going to create a piece of middleware. So I'll call this context middleware. And straight away, I'm going to put it in its own file. So here underneath type defs, we'll say const context middleware equals require. I'm going to put it in a util folder. So let's say /util in the same directory, /util /context middleware, like so. Save that. And here, well, let's create that file. So I'm going to create a new file underneath util. So util /context middleware.js. And let's say module.exports equals, and actually no, let's remove that. And this will be a function. So, and a function that will take the context and then does the following. So it will check for the request body or the request, and then we'll check for the header and then get the user. So we need to actually get JWT inside of here. So here, let's say const JWT equals require JSON web token. What else do we need? We need the authentication error, or actually we don't. I'll tell you why in a second. First off, when we need to add the user to the context, because otherwise this will the user will not be accessible in the context. So here after this if statement, I'll say context.user equals, or actually it should be done here inside of here, equals decoded token like this, and remove this line. And after this if statement, I'm going to return the context. Save that, and I'm going to comment this for now. And let's go back to, okay, everything is fine here. Oh, actually we need to get the JWT secret. So I'm just going to cut the import from the resolvers. Actually, I'm not going to cut it because it's needed here. I'm just going to copy it. And let's go to the context middleware, paste that in. So we have access to the JWT secret. And now in our server, so that's being used. So on each request, we're going to get the user and attach it to the context. So save that. And now in this resolver, so here inside of this get users, in fact, inside any resolver, we have access to the user inside the context. So we can actually just destructure it. So do user like this. And of course, if the user is not authenticated, this is going to be null. So there's no errors here. So what we need to do here to check that the user is authenticated, we can simply just say if not user, then throw authentication error. And this should say unauthenticated. And that should do the trick. Let's actually test this, make sure that it's working. So, okay, there's no errors. Let's click on our server. Actually, I already had the playground open, but whatever. So I'm going to log in now with this John user. I'll copy this token, and let's run the query to get users. So let's say query get users, and run get users, and I'll just get UUID and the username. All right, so okay, there's a problem here. There is no UID on the user, at least on the type. So I'll just run this now. Okay, authentication error cannot be invoked without new. Okay, so yeah, here I need to throw a new error, my bad. So throw a new error. Okay, run that. Okay, so now it says unauthenticated because that token is probably expired. So if I select that old token and paste the new one, now it should run. And there we go. So we get all of our users, and there's only Jane that is not John in the database. So it works. Our middleware now works fine. So now we can actually use it in other resolvers. And so we'll use it in the send message resolver. So here, because we have the user in the context, we can now destructure it here as well. So instead of context, we'll destructure the user. And at the top of the try block, we can say if not user. So same logic from here. We might as well just copy this line. Maybe it wouldn't have taken me less to type it, but whatever. So paste it there. And so okay, so we check for the user. So if we get here, that means they're logged in. So that's cool. Now we need to get who they're sending the message to. And in fact, we need to fetch them from the database because we can't just assume that the two that they sent as part of the arguments is, you know, a valid user in our database. Actually, let's destructure those arguments. So remember, we get to and content. So now let's find this user that corresponds to the to argument. So here we'll say const, and let's call it recipient. So because they're the recipient of the message. And this will be await user dot find one, and the condition will be, so we'll say where the username is equal to 2, like this. So now let's check if they don't exist. We need to error out. So if not recipient, then let's throw a new error. So throw new, and this will be user input error, and it will just say user not found. We don't need to return like an errors object because there's only one error. So if we get here, that means the recipient exists. So let's actually send them this message. Let's persist the message in the database. Or actually, I forgot one thing. We need to validate for content as well, because if this is empty, we need to throw an error. So here, let's say if content dot trim dot length equals, actually no, I'm not going to use length. I'm just going to say that's a different methodology, but I'm just going to do two different. You can say dot length equals 0 or equal or like this. I think this makes more sense because it's a string. So here, if the content dot trim equals an empty string, we just simply throw a new user input error, and this will say content is empty, or message is empty. We're going to use client-side validation for this. This is just a second line of defense. So here we'll create the message. So we'll say const message equals await message. Have I imported the message here? Actually, we need to import the message model. So here we'll say message from models. Actually, I'm going to put it before the user because of alphabetical order. And here we'll say await message dot create, and we'll create a message with the from. So the from will be our username, which we already have, so we don't need to fetch it from the database. It's stored in the user object that is in the context, that is fetched in the context. So we'll say user, the from is user.username, and the to is the to that we get here, so we can leave it as it is, like that. And the content is the content as well, so we can leave it like that. All right, now we just simply return this message, and that should do the trick. So let's save that, and let's see if that works. So we're logged in as John, and we already have a token that's valid here, so we can actually send a message to Jane. So let's add a mutation here. So mutation send message, and this will be the send message mutation, and this takes a 2. So 2 is Jane, and takes a content, and this will say, hey Jane, Jane, what's up? Exclamation mark instead of question mark. And we'll get the UID, the content. Actually, let's get everything. So from and to content, and the actually I forgot I need to add a created at to the message type. So here, the message here, let's add a created at. So created at, and that's a string, and let's save. And that might have been okay. Actually, we need to map the, or never mind. Okay, so send the message. So let's get the created at as well. Let's hit send. And there we go. So it actually sent the message, and that was persisted in the database. If you check your database, I'll check in the command line. So root, use chat, and let's select star from messages. There we go. So you get the first message is from John to Jane, and that's the UID, and that's the message. That's cool. There's one thing that we need to sort out, which is now we can actually send a message to ourselves, which is of course not acceptable. So if you, let's say you're a legend, because apparently John has a very big ego, and there you go, we actually persist a message from John to John, which is of course not the behavior we need in this app. So we need to check here, actually where, no, I'm looking at the wrong resolver, sorry. So here, if no recipient, but we need to say also else if, so here, if the recipient exists, we need to make sure that their username is not the same as our username, or whatever, whoever the user is logged in, that's logged in. So we'll say if, else if recipient.username equals user.username, then we need to throw a new user input error, and we could just say you can't message yourself, like this, save. And now if we execute this, we get you can't message yourself. All right, cool. So that's working as intended. Now let's do a bit of refactoring, because this file is getting a bit like too big. So I'm gonna split the resolvers into multiple files. The type definitions is fine, it's not getting that big. Whenever it does, I'm gonna split it, but it hasn't yet. So for resolvers, let's say inside the GraphQL folder, let's create a new file, and let's just call it message resolvers. Actually, let's create a resolvers directory inside the GraphQL folder. So resolvers slash message resolvers, or maybe just messages.js, that's fine. And same for users. So here, let's create a new file, users.js, and I'll actually just copy the whole resolvers file and paste it into both messages and users. And what I'm gonna do is inside of users, I'm gonna remove anything that pertains to messages. So I'll keep get users, I'll keep login, and keep register, but I'll remove the send message mutation. So just cut that or erase it. And inside the messages, I'll do the opposite. So I'll remove anything that has to do with users. So I'll remove the register mutation, and also remove all the queries right now have to do with users. So I'll just remove all of them. In fact, just remove the query key. And now remove anything that we don't need here. So we don't need the JWT secret. And the imports should go back another level, because we're inside like another directory. So add that, like a .. So we don't need the operators, the JWT, and we don't need bcrypt here. So save this. And in the users, we don't need, what do we don't need? Actually, we don't need the user, the message model, and the these. So click here and also click here, like hold alt and click here and add a .. to add another level of directory. And we need everything here, so let's leave them as it is and save. Now we need to actually get these resolvers from the different files. So I'll actually delete this resolvers file, resolvers.js, and inside the resolvers directory, I'll create an index.js file. Here I'll import all the resolvers. So let's say const user resolvers equals require from the same directory users. I'll copy that one more time, and select users, Control D, and change this to message. So message resolvers require messages. And here we'll say module.exports. And now we just need to merge both of them. So we'll have a query, entry or key. And here we'll spread both the queries of the users and the messages. So we'll say ... user resolvers.query, and then comma, repeat that one more time, and change this to message. And I'll actually just duplicate this as well one more time, and this will be, select this and Control D twice and say mutation. And even though the message resolvers doesn't have a query key, that's fine. We can spread undefined and you will not add anything. It's okay. So save. And now in our server, this should work the same. Because even if you import resolvers like this from resolvers, it's going to look for an index.js file there. So everything should work the same. All right, the server did an error. So let's go and double check. Execute login, that works. Execute get users, that works. And sending a message. Actually, this should error because I'm sending it to myself. That's cool. So the files are like included and everything is fine. So hello Jane, that's get sent. So that's cool. Everything is linked without any problem. Okay, let's now start to work on a query that allows the user to fetch messages. So before we do that, I want to actually create another user. And I want to create another user and then create a couple of more messages so it makes more sense later when we test these queries. So I'll just copy this query and I'm going to create another user. So I'll change this to mutation, and this will be the register mutation. So change this to register. Same, change this to register. I'm going to create a user with a called user, and just copy this one more time. Change this to confirm password, and we need, what else? An email, and this will be user@email.com. And now just hit Control Enter, cool, so that user is registered. Now I'm gonna log in. So we have two messages from John to Jane. I'm gonna log in as Jane and send a message back. So copy that token, paste it here, and I'll send a message to John saying, hey John, good, you, and send it back. And now I'm gonna send like a message from John to this new user. So later we want to test like if we get the correct messages from our query. So here I'll put John's token, and I'll send a message to user, and assuming that John knows the user's new user, so we'll say, hey user, welcome to chat, whatever, and then send that, and I'll just log in as the user and just send a message back. I'll just copy this. You can skip this section. Like, oh, I should have said this like a couple of seconds ago, but whatever. It's all right. So here the user will reply back to John and say, hey, John, thanks. And this will be to John. All right, there we go. So it gives us like a small data sample to test with. Okay, so let's create a resolver to fetch messages. So let's go to our type definitions. And this will be a query. So inside the query type under login, let's say get messages. And this needs to take a like a username. So if you're a user, you want to get messages between you and someone else. You don't get just all your messages. So this will take this will be a string, and it's required. And it will return like a collection of messages, an array of messages. So open square brackets and say message, and then do exclamation mark here. And save that, and let's go to the messages resolvers, and here we need to create the query key, and inside the query we need to have our get messages, and this is an async resolver, and it will take parent, and from the args we're just gonna destructure from. And we need the context as well, because we need to make sure that the user is logged in. Actually, we can just straight away destructure the user from the context. And now this will do the following. So we need to open a try catch block. So try catch error and console.log the error and throw the error. And here we need to check for the user. So I'll just copy this line. So if no user, throw the authentication error. And now we need to actually fetch the other user. So we'll say const, what is it, recipient? Actually, this will not be recipient, it will just be the other user. So I'll call it other user equals await user dot find. So we have their username, which is in from. So we'll say find one, and we'll pass a condition, and this condition will have where, and this will say where username colon, so the value will be from. So where the username is this provided from argument. And here we need, of course, to check that if they don't exist. So if not other user, then we need to throw new user input error, and this will say user not found. Otherwise, now what we need to do, we need to run an SQL query that fetches from the messages table, and it needs to find, actually, let me demonstrate to you. So say, okay, select from messages. So for example, if we need to get messages between John and Jane, we need to get all the messages that in the from, they either have John or Jane, and in the to, they either have Jane or John. So we can use the or statement where it says where from is John and to is Jane, or from is Jane and to is John. But it's more efficient to use like an and statement in SQL. So I'll use like a slightly different format, which is actually more efficient. But yeah, okay, I'll show you. So const messages, let's say await message dot find all, and we need to pass this a condition, and the condition will be where. And here we need to use the in operator. If you're familiar with SQL, this is like an operator where you check if a value is an array of values. And because here we need to check if the from is in the two user names, and the same thing for two. So we need to use the operator from Sequelize. So here let's say const and destructure op equals require Sequelize, and here the from, so we'll give the from condition, and this will be an object, and the key will be, so open square brackets and do op.in, and they have to be, actually we need to create this array. So this array is simply just the two usernames of the from and to. So here we'll say const usernames equals, and equals an array, and the first username is user.username, the logged in user's username, and the second one is the other user.username, like this. And we know we have it because we've gone beyond this point. So actually, I think did I misspell this? Users, actually, yeah, username, not usernames, not users' names. So here the from needs to be in usernames, and then I'll just duplicate this one more time, and this will be the two. And actually, we need to order them because we need to get the latest messages first. So we'll say order, and well, this takes an array of arrays. Each array represents one key and the type of ordering. So the key here is the created at, and by default is ascending, but we need descending, so we need to pass desk like that. I don't know if that's pronounced desk, but whatever. So here, yeah, okay, this is fine. We just need to return these messages. So just say return messages, and this will map them automatically into a JSON for us because it's Sequelize. So let's save that. Make sure that there's no errors in the console. Cool, there isn't. Let's check if that's running. So here, actually, I'm just going to copy these two and take them into a new tab. So open a new tab and paste them there. And I'm just going to copy this authorization token. And actually, I want to get John's token. I want to make sure I get that one. So login as John, and just copy this. And here, open, double click this, and paste that and close. So here we need to execute this new query. So we'll say query get messages By the way, like this, the name of the query itself doesn't matter at all. This is just for the for when we send a request for the GraphQL to tell which operation to execute. So you can name this whatever you want, but the name of the query inside, you know, has to pertain to the query that we created. So this has to be the same. So we need to get messages from, and I'll get messages from Jane. I mean, not just from, like between me and Jane as John. So here we'll open, we'll get everything, UID from to content, and created that. So let's run that. There we go. So we get, so of course the latest one is first. So if we start from the bottom, we get John sent, hey Jane, what's up? Oh, okay, this needs to be deleted from the database actually, because you see this is the one I sent to myself. So this needs to be deleted. Actually, I'll just delete it now. So it's ID2, so delete from messages where ID equals 2. Cool. So if I execute again, that should be gone. All right, cool. So hey Jane, hello Jane, and then she replies, hey John, good, you. Cool. So if I get, if I say from user, cool, I get hey user, welcome to chat, and then hey John, thanks, and I misspelled John. All right, cool. So getting messages between users is working, and now we can actually use that on the front end and display messages. One thing actually, I want to map this time from epoch into an actual ISO string. So here we can simply actually, this should be, yeah, this should be outside in the index. So in the index here, let's add, so this will be a specific field resolver. So here for messages, so message, I don't know if I've mentioned yet, but so for example, if you look at your type of definitions, you have resolvers that match exactly your type definitions. So for example, for query, we have resolvers for this and this and this. We can also have resolvers for these types, for the user type and for the message type and for the, you know, for the fields that are inside of that. So for example, here, if we want to map the created at, we can simply say here for message inside of that, we can say created at, and this will have a parent. So now we can actually use the parent, because the parent is holds the value that is forwarded from the previous resolver. But since in these top level resolvers here, we don't get any parent because it's the first resolver that is executed. But here, whenever there is a resolver that returns, for example, messages, this will go through this one. So we can, you know, perform any type of transformation on it. So here we need to make the created at, so we'll return. So we'll say parent. So doing arrow syntax like this means like we need to return the parent dot created at, and we simply chain the actually let me close this to ISO string like this. So save that, and now the created at dates on messages should be ISO strings, and they are. Cool. And even like with other ones, so for sending messages, oh, you can't message yourself. Okay, let me message Jane again. Good too. Just coding. All right, send it. And now here as well, we get it as an ISO string. All right, so that's one thing that I wanted to address as well. And here, actually, I forgot maybe to explain in the context middleware, if we get an error, be careful, don't throw an error here, because for your other resolvers that don't need the user to be authenticated, you don't throw an error because, you know, you don't care if they're not logged in. So I can just omit actually all of this. So only if there's the user, just, you know, add them to the context. All right, so that's that for getting messages. And yeah, so if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And please let me know in the comments. If you dislike the video, do feel free to dislike it, but do me a favor and tell me why you disliked it. And if you have any problem, any question, feel free to ask, and I'll help with what I can. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.